Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lauren De Laguna. I have a very special guest here tonight, the one, the only Andrew Wilson. Hey, Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I really appreciate you coming and for having this discussion because I feel like we had what was our first conversation about? What was the first? It doesn't matter. We had a debate and I anticipated being on the same side as you. And we ended up being on very different sides. So I want to get to know you. I want to get to understand you. And I want to tell my audience about who you are. So let's start off about where are you from?
Originally from
Mm-hmm.
California.
What part?
Southern California is where I was born, and then I moved to Northern California.
I'm from Orange County. Are you from the Orange
Yeah,
County area?
no.
What part of
So
Orange? Okay.
that would be, let's see, Joshua Tree is where I spent most of my early years, and then from Joshua Tree, Northern California, up in the Sonoma County area.
Okay. Alrighty. And where did you go to college?
I didn't go to college. I
You
went to
didn't go
trade
to,
school.
you went to trade school. What did you study for trade school?
Well, I started with industrial maintenance and mechanical maintenance, and then moved on to robotic engineering.
Okay. And how long were you involved in robotic engineering and using your trade for your primary source of income?
10 years.
10 years. And then, so at that point you were like 30 years oldish when you stopped doing that? Maybe 28-ish.
Uh, no, like 39-ish.
Oh, okay. So you didn't start trade school right out of high school then?
Oh, no, no, no. I'm sorry. I thought you said when I stopped doing it. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So how you
Maybe.
did trade? All right. So you worked for like 20 years then in that trade.
Yeah,
No.
roughly.
Nice. And then you started doing YouTube full time?
I still work part time
Okay. And how did you get into YouTube?
by total accident. So I had absolutely no intention whatsoever of ever doing a single stream. And I didn't care about streamers and thought that most streamers are pieces of shit and still do. The way that I got into this was I was promoting a site that I owned, and I was promoting it on Facebook, and I ran across a political Facebook group, and they had a stupid show on there called Table Talk, and they were all morons. And so I asked if I could go on the show because they were pissing me off one evening, and I did. And I absolutely eviscerated the entire panel on that show. And then I went back the next night and I did it again. And so they started asking me to come on regularly, which I did. And then from there, I started working with some of the people in that group, and we created Politically Provoked, which was a different show, an altogether different show. And I was on there as a primary right wing debater for about 10, 11 months. And then there was a falling out there, and I started the Crucible, which was like the best thing that could ever have happened.
How long ago was that?
The Crucible?
Yeah, how many years ago did that start?
I guess over a year, maybe a year and 3 months total.
Oh, okay. And what's your plan with this YouTube channel? What was the whole goal of it when you when you started it?
Well,
Was it to
it primarily is and was a debate channel, and that's what the content's always going to focus around. Primarily is debating, though we do a lot of other content. I was told when I started doing other content on the channel that you couldn't do that; that it needed to either be, one or the other. In order to be a neutral moderator, I couldn't be going after leftist scumbags. But it turns out that I can do excellent debate moderation and be neutral during a debate, even if I don't like the people who are debating, right? And I don't know why other people can't do that, but I can. So anyway, the Crucible is, to my knowledge, the fastest growing debate channel on YouTube, period. Nothing even comes close. It's definitely one of the most well paid attention to by the most amount of actual debaters who tend to want to tune in, and the most amount of e-celebs as far as I can see. So definitely going to keep on going with that.
How have you been a conservative your entire life?
Yeah, I was born based. My dad was a product of the 1940s and staunchly conservative himself. He's always been staunchly conservative, and my mom followed suit. Yeah, I've always been a staunch conservative and a staunch Christian.
And your parents, they're still together?
Yeah, that's correct.
And how long ago did you meet your wife?
Well, you're going to get me in trouble with questions like that, Lauren. Like, because I don't remember. I don't know, like 20 years ago, something like that. Oh. You know what I mean? I don't fucking remember. A long time ago.
Well, do you know what wedding anniversary is coming up? Like what number it is?
Just we'll skip. We're gonna skip this.
Okay, so like, and your wife has been helping you in your content creation, correct?
No.
No, is she not a streamer as well?
No.
Well, I've seen her debate before.
Yeah, she does debate.
Debated.
Yeah,
so she does. So she is a debater.
Yeah, but she's not a streamer. She has a YouTube channel and she posts some content up there, but she's not a content creator. She most certainly doesn't help me create content at all. She does debates occasionally because she likes to debate with feminists, but she primarily focuses on academics. And so she wrote a book called Occult Feminism, fantastic book, sold a lot of copies. And she gives lectures all over the place on this particular topic. And that's what she does. Other than that, she has her hands full because she has to run a household that has kids in it.
Right. Yeah. That was going to be my next question. How many kids do you guys have? And not specifics, so I don't want to like dox anyone, but just like you guys have kids
5.
together.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a handful of kids. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of kids. Yeah. And with these kids, how are you raising them? Are you putting them in public school? Are you putting them in private school? What's the
they're homeschooled style? They're homeschooled. There's only 2 left at home. Yeah. And they're homeschooled.
Okay. And did you do that because of what was your philosophy behind homeschooling them? Because I feel like the whole
schools have become public indoctrination centers, which no longer reflect the moral values that I'm trying to instill in my children. In fact,
but that talking point is kind of a newer talking point. So you've believed that from like the get-go for 20 past years.
Well, you're incorrect. It's not a new talking point. Something which has been going on for a long time. Even back in the 90s, I was hearing talk of homeschooling. It's just that right now, finally, due to kind of internet access, there are more groups and there's more access to it than ever before. People didn't know, for instance, that you could homeschool your kids and still put them in on sports teams in public schools. You can do that. They have no idea what it is that you're allowed or not allowed to do with homeschool curriculum. So those resources just plain have not been available to people for a long time. And now suddenly those resources are available. And so when more people, kind of find out what they can or can't do, they start moving more and more towards those options because public schools suck. They're not good.
Yeah, I agree.
Sending a child off to learn for 8 hours a day is counterproductive anyway. Kids don't learn that way. Sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day, that's ridiculous. Nobody learns that way. I don't like being in a classroom for 8 hours a day.
How are you brought up?
What do you mean?
Like, did you go to public school, private school, homeschool?
Yeah, I went to public school.
You went to public. Did you like experience the liberal indoctrination in which you're?
Oh yeah.
What specifically did you experience while you were in public school?
Well, I was a product out of time. So my dad was an older man when I was born, and so I learned an older set of metric values for morality, and they did not fit. So I've always been staunchly anti-LGBTQ, and I've always been firm on what value structures that I would allow and would not allow anywhere around me. And that does not fit inside a public school where the expectation is that you conform to, and even then it was the expectation that you conform to these value structures, and I never would.
When it comes to the LGBTQ stuff, did you have, and feel free not to answer this if this is too personal, but like, did any of your kids experiment in the LGBTQ thing, and how did you handle that?
I mean, that's an inappropriate question. So,
Oh,
but
I just
even,
mean,
but even if it, but
I'm not
even
trying
if,
to like
yeah,
pry into your personal. I'm just trying to say, like, because you're somebody who's staunchly anti-LGBTQ. So I'm trying to figure out if you have like if you had someone in
if
your
I
family
had
or a
kids
loved
that
one
did,
that was
if I had kids that did, I
LGBTQ,
would disown them. How's that for an answer?
you would disown like it. So like, let's just say you had a son and he had one homosexual experience one time and he was experimenting it. You would disown him?
Yeah,
How how come?
because it's contrary to my values. So if he murdered a person only one time, I would disown him too, Lauren.
But what if he had like premarital sex with a woman?
What if he did?
Well, isn't that also against your staunch Christian values?
Not all sins are equal, Lauren.
Yeah, I would consider murder and homosexual sex to be two very different
Yeah, but why would I
sins.
care what Lauren considers to be the moral standard? I don't follow the Bible
No, I figured you
as
cared about
according to
God.
Lauren De Laguna. I follow the
Right,
Bible
God.
according to the church teachings and
Right.
the Bible according to my religion. The Bible according to my religion states emphatically that sins of the flesh, this is from Paul himself, he states that this is one of the worst carnal sins that you can possibly partake in. And it's not that there wouldn't be any redemption available for a kid, but at least while they're engaging in an activity like that, I would not support them at all, period, ever, not even a little bit.
But so hold on. But you classify homosexual sex to be radically worse than heterosexual premarital sex,
Yes.
even though the Bible considers them to be equally sinful. They're
Oh,
just
yeah.
both
Where were
sins.
people getting stoned in the Bible for having premarital sex? Can you make the reference for me? Because they most certainly were getting killed for the homosexual sex. Most certainly were not getting killed for premarital
Isn't that why?
sex.
Hold on. Didn't Mary need to say that she was married to Joseph to
Yeah,
ensure that
the
people
public
didn't
shame would
think
have
that
sucked,
she
but
was
they would.
married?
Yeah, they didn't want to get. Public shame would be bad. So yes, they were publicly shamed, but no, it's never been as egregious a sin to do that. It's still sinful, right? And I would still do my best to correct the behavior, but no, I don't consider them to be identical at all, not even close.
Okay. Just out of like, what do you even have to have these talks with your kids, or because they're homeschooled, they're not really as exposed to that sort of stuff? So you're not even having like the talks with them about like this type of like a man should be with a man, or a man should be with a woman and a woman should be with a man, and not any other combination.
Yeah, I'm going to
Like,
teach them the value structures that I would teach them, whether they went to public school or not. The value structures that I'm going to teach them are Christian values, always. So
I think I asked that question. I worded it poorly. What I'm asking is, did you have to sit down and have a talk? Like, because if they went to public school, they probably would have been indoctrinated with LGBTQ stuff. And then you would have had to sit down and explain it to them and then give them your point of view. What I'm asking is, because you homeschooled them, did you not even have to explain what the LGBTQ
No, you still have to
stuff
explain
was?
it. Of course you do. They still have unfettered, access to the internet. They still watch Hollywood programming, right? It's all over multimedia. And by the way, you have a responsibility as a parent to prepare your children for the world. So I wouldn't hide this from them. I would tell them exactly the state that the world is in. They're going to have to deal with it at some point after they launch from my home and be out in the world. So of course they're going to have knowledge of this, understand what these different agendas are, understand what indoctrination is, what propaganda is, and understand how to deal with those things accordingly. You literally have a responsibility to your children to make sure that they're prepared for that. Once they have left the home, they can make whatever decisions that they want on their own behest, and I can't stop them from doing that, nor do I have much inclination to do so other than to give them my opinion. But once you're an adult and you've decided to go do your own thing, go do your own thing. It's now up to you. I've prepared you the best that I possibly can for the world.
But you still like disown them. Like, if they went out into the world and then started doing things that you disagreed with, you would disown them.
Yeah, just like I would if they went out and started murdering people, or they went out and started stealing from people, or things like that. As long as if they had a professional occupation as a thief, for instance, I most certainly would not have a relationship with him until they stopped being a thief, and until they repented of being a thief, until they did something to stop this particular proclivity and activity. Same thing if they were murderers. Same thing if they were engaging in any number of sins. Another one that I could point to easily is, let's assume one of them was having an affair with a married man, right? Yes, I would treat that extremely harshly. So yes, all of these things I think are completely reasonable and within the confines of what a parent's responsibility are. I think one of the big problems in society.
It's not as equivalent weight as long as they're both unmarried, right? So if it's premarital sex, that's not as bad as homosexual sex, which is not as bad.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I feel like we've been over it, but no, it's not as bad. It's still bad. It's still bad, but it's just like this. Let me ask you this question, Lauren. Do you agree that theft is wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, but do you also agree that stealing a penny is far less egregious than stealing somebody's life savings?
Yeah.
Okay, so you wouldn't consider the sin to be equal?
No.
Okay, so then why are you asking me this question on repeat?
Because when I've talked to you in the past, you've had a very particular focus on promiscuity. It really seems like you feel like the value of a person goes down, especially, and this is just my opinion, so please correct me if I'm wrong, especially women if they're promiscuous. So I'm very confused where if I were you and I had a son and he was gay, but he was with the same gay guy forever, and then they even got married and they even waited to have sex until after marriage.
They can't get married.
Well, they can't get married in the church.
They cannot have a marriage that I will recognize.
Okay. But that to you would still be worse than if you had like a daughter who was engaging in hundreds of different men, so long as those men were all unmarried. And
hundreds? I think that's different. I think that's different when you say they're engaging in hundreds of the same sin. Right? Now we have a pattern for sinful behavior, and we have a pattern that they're not repentful of it, and that they're not trying to change of it. And that might change the circumstances drastically. Listen, I need you to understand that in Orthodoxy, the way that we look at sin is as a sickness. We take a holistic approach. We look at it as a sickness. Some sins are going to make you sicker than other sins. Okay. Sin of homosexuality in the flesh is going to make you far sicker than some of the other sins that you might engage in. The goal of an Orthodox Christian is to eliminate that sickness. That's how we see it. We see it as a sickness. Of course, some things you're going to do which are sinful are going to have less of an impact overarchingly on you, the person, than other activities. Do I think that a woman who has promiscuous sex for a year is in worse shape than a woman who has promiscuous sex for 20? No, I don't. Of course not. That would be ridiculous. Do I think, though, that all of these things are sinful and should be stayed away from? Yes. But when I'm viewing it, and I'm viewing it as a holistic on the whole, okay, I also have to confront the fact that the world, the entirety of the world, is telling women to do this as much as it possibly can. It's telling them that this is liberating, that this is good, that there's no problem with it. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. And I think that that is awful messaging, and that should be combated at every turn. That's what I think.
I mean, I don't disagree. See, that's where you and I agree on a lot of things. So for instance, like the BET Awards, the VMA Awards, watching, all of these celebrities dressed scantily clad for children specifically, just like the constant bombardment of promiscuity in our music, in our TV shows, legislators promoting pleasure-based sexual education. I mean, there's definitely a push towards promiscuity. Where I disagree with you, though, is when we talk about like the value of a person. So for instance, last time we spoke, we talked about like a high value woman versus a low value woman. And you were saying that a woman decreases in value with every penis that goes inside of her.
Yeah.
And that's where.
Let's try to reflect on this, because we were in a panel and it was combative. So maybe you didn't understand what I was saying. So let me try to make this as crystal clear as I can. You recognize that there's a distinction between an is claim and an ought claim. So a descriptive is. This is true versus this ought to be the truth or this ought to happen. There's a distinction there.
Mhm.
What is true is that society and men are going to view women as less than every single time she has sex with another dude, which is why the hypothetical comes up of if all things are equal and you had the same woman, right? The same exact woman, but one has slept with 50 men and the other one has slept with 0 men, but all other things are equal. They're going to treat you the same. They're going to be exactly, the same to you no matter what. Which woman do you think most men would prefer? And if the answer is the one that has slept with 0 men, the answer is actually there for you to see in plain English and in plain sight that men descriptively, it lowers the value of women the more men a woman has had sex with.
So for you, value is just like, so for a woman's value is how men value her and like see her. And then a man's,
You're missing what I'm saying again. You're missing what I'm saying again. I'm giving you
what
a
you're saying is there's
descriptive
two
claim of
identical
reality.
women.
Yeah.
Right.
No. It's the same woman. It's the same woman. Same, not identical. It's the same woman, right? All things equal, though. If you could have that woman when she's had no men, or you can have that woman after she's had 50 men.
If who
which
could
one
have
do you
her?
think most men would pick?
So most men. Who would most
Right.
men? So the value lies in how most men would pick this person. So it's the opinion of men
From
which gives
from a
their
standpoint of sexuality, when you were having a discussion over what makes a woman more valuable to a man, which is what this discussion you and I were having on that panel was. That's why that descriptive claim comes up, because obviously what's going to make the woman more valuable to the man is if she has more virtue and chastity intact, all things equal. I don't know how anybody would disagree with that.
Well, here I do have a question. Do you have any friends who are cucks?
No.
Well, maybe not. Okay, so you
I
don't
would
have any friends
never
that are cucks.
associate. I would never associate with a human being, at least interpersonally, as a friend, who had a relationship where they allowed somebody to have sex with their significant other while they watched. I would never do that, ever.
It doesn't
Never.
necessarily have to be while they watch, but I understand where you're coming from.
Or just
but you
at
understand,
all, period.
yeah. But you understand those people do exist, right?
Yeah, I understand they exist.
So you understand that there are some men who actually value women with a higher body count more than they would value women with a lower body count.
Yeah, but this is the problem you had the last panel. You can't. This is why I said if you ask most men. So on average, you and I are going to agree, aren't we, Lauren, that most men don't want other men to fuck their girlfriends and wives. You agree with me that that's true, right?
Most.
Most. Yeah. Right. So then the people that you're talking about are not the most. They're the not most. Right? So we're talking about on average, which is the point of the hypothetical, is to say on average.
It wasn't about on average. It was about the value of a woman. We were talking about how much, like if a woman loses value or gains value, how do you determine the value of a woman?
To a man.
To a man.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to say the previous is very subjective, the value. And you're saying, well, the average man thinks this way. And it's like, okay,
then it doesn't sound that subjective.
No, that's the definition of subjective. The fact that you
What's
can have
the definition of subjective?
When it's not an objective truth.
The definition of subjective is when it's not objective.
Well, I don't think that's like, well, it's not. That's not like the dictionary. This, but like, yeah, in essence, yeah. Yes.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. If you think most men, right? When I ask most, how many men do you think are cucks? Do you even think it's like 3%? I don't even think it's that high.
I know it's that high.
Well, how do you know it's that high? Can you demonstrate for me that 3% of men are cucks, that they actually let men fuck their significant others?
Want men to fuck their significant others?
Yeah.
I swear, the wild, wild world out there.
I mean, how many do you actually think that there are? I don't think that there's that many.
It is that many. I promise you, there is a large cuck community. There's even an even larger private cuck community. There's I forgot to tell you this. This is the best part. Most of the cucks from my area they cuck after church. They're all churchgoers. They go to church, and then on Sundays they like do the wife swapping. They do the cucking. They do, yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's
That
religious
doesn't
people who
surprise
get
me.
involved. Why does that really? I thought that would be surprising to you because you're religious, and so I'd figure that you would think
Degenerates
like
have
most of the
always
church would have-
degenerates have always utilized the morality of the church to hide in, and the reason that they do this is because it gives them legitimacy. So in this way, they can present to on their face that they're moral, good, upstanding human beings, whereas behind closed doors, they're doing things that they should not be doing. This is something which is very common.
Okay, so it's definitely greater than 3%, though, is my point. If
Prove it.
even you're not surprised.
I don't think so. I doubt it. I doubt that 3% of the men in the United States want other men to fuck their woman. I don't believe it. I literally don't believe it.
Okay, let's look it up. What percent of men are cucks? I don't know if there is an answer, like a research data answer to this. Yeah, Yahoo. You think Yahoo Sports will have the answer to that? I don't know. Cuckolding, while it doesn't seem very well known or talked about, is in fact a very common fantasy among couples. In researching for his book, Tell Me What You Want, Justin J. Leheimer, PhD, surveyed 4,175 Americans and found that 26% of heterosexual women and 52% of heterosexual men, 42% of non-heterosexual men, and 66% of non-heterosexual men had fantasized about cuckolding. There are even
Does that mean
that's
I don't
more
understand?
than 50%.
So wait,
I
is that
win.
like that's crazy? That's like saying that because so many women. That's insane. That's like saying that because so many women have rape fantasies, that exact number of women have also been raped.
Entire separate.
How dumb are you, Lauren? You realize
No,
that saying that because there was a survey where people claimed that they had this fantasy, that doesn't mean that they're engaging in cuckoldry.
Okay. There are even entire subreddits on Reddit devoted to the R cuckold community, R cuckold stories, and even R cuck psychology, each with tens of thousands of members. Okay.
Tens of thousands of members inside of a nation of 330 million people.
Look, if over 50% of the population is fantasizing about this, I highly doubt only 3% of the population is engaging in it.
Hey, that holds up. If only 60% of women have rape fantasies, then that means at least 60% of women have been raped.
First of all, can we start using the word great?
Great.
Please.
Sorry.
I like my algorithm, so if you could not destroy it, that'd be wonderful.
But I mean, you realize that actually makes no sense, right? That just because you have a survey where it says X amount of people have such and such fantasy.
60% of women are not having those types of fantasies. So, okay.
Oh yeah, how many women are having those types of fantasies? And then could we map that on, even if it was 40%, to say that then 40% of women have engaged in this activity? Because that makes no sense, Lauren.
And it's not about one is like something that's forced upon you, and one is something that you can actively engage in. So that doesn't even, the analogy doesn't even apply.
Well, with any behavior then, Lauren, whatever behavior that you want.
I'm trying to help you out. I'm trying to think of an analogy that was something that people maybe people fantasize about having threesomes, okay? But have never engaged in. Is that a better?
But wouldn't you say that they're okay? Sure, let's take threesomes. Wouldn't you say that the amount of people who have fantasized about having threesomes versus the amount of people who have is far? There's a huge disparity between the two.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that it would go from 50% all the way down to 3%. Okay.
Why not?
I'd say it's
can you give us data to the contrary of how many men are actually allowing other men to fuck their significant other? You don't think that doesn't just intuit? There's only 3% of the entire male population are homosexuals. Did you know that? 3% of the entire male population in the United States are homosexuals. And you're claiming that the amount of cucks is on par with that. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, well, so
first saying 2%. My chat's saying it's about 2%. 2%. 2%. Lauren. 2.
Yeah. Okay. So even that data there's a wide variety. So you could find, I think, some data that goes down to 1.5 all the way to some data that goes up to like 10.
So you were being disingenuous a second ago. So you saw the number, and then you acted like you didn't know what the number was, and now you've just copped to it. You say that there's conflicting data. So you just saw the data in front of you, didn't you?
No, I think you're misunderstanding me.
We're talking about cucks, right?
I don't know that I was talking about the number of gay people, percentage of gay men.
Okay, I thought you were talking about cucks.
We were, and then you switched to percentage of gay men, and then I was talking about.
Yes, I was just saying, it's extremely low is my point. It's extremely low. Wouldn't you agree, though, that with the cuckoldry thing, you don't actually have any data to support what you're saying, that any significant portion of the population at all approves of a dude humping their significant? That doesn't sound absurd to you?
I mean, we know that key parties used to be a popular thing in the 60s. It was like a thing that was just a social commonplace. So I don't think it's that crazy.
That was not common. It happened, but it wasn't common.
The fact that like everybody recognizes instantly what a key party is, and you don't think it's common.
That's because media enhances. Yeah, media enhances these things in public perception. Movies have had allusions to this, especially ones that are set in that era often. So it surprises me not even a little bit that people would be able to recognize what the term is, but that doesn't mean that it was common. I think that it's actually rare. So I've talked with thousands of men, and of course, I've been friends with men my entire life. I am aware that I've met one guy who was at work and he allowed that shit to happen, but I didn't want anything to do with him. But other than that, I mean, we're talking extremely rare. Met maybe one person my entire life.
So like, I mean, but you know of people who are cucks. Like, for instance, Adam 22, and of like tons of other similar internet personality types. So those people exist. He's
a porn star though.
There are plenty of people that are extremely sexually provocative, and they don't seem to be engaging in the same type of sexual activity that you're engaging in. And you seem to be holding society at the standards of the sexual chastity that you want for you and your family.
That's true. I hold very high standards for morality, including, so I have high expectations that society also not murder. I have high expectations they not steal. Well, I have high expectations that they do all sorts of moral oughts that I consider to be imperatives for society. Absolutely. Does that include the promotion and recognition of sexual deviancy as well? Yes, it does.
You were trying to say that it's extremely low. Okay, but you could recognize that it happens, like at a high. So even though you're holding these people at high standards, like you would hope that people don't steal and people don't kill, you would recognize that.
Well, I don't just hope. I mean, we institute legislation,
but you recognize that a large percentage of people still do that. So a large percentage of people
don't do that. Large percentage of people don't murder, and a large percentage of people they're not in prison for theft. Large percentage of people do not do this type of stuff.
You keep you take one thing and then you take the opposite. So I'm saying a large percent of people do, and then you're saying, but then a large percentage of people don't. Yeah, that's not mutually exclusive, and that doesn't
well, they either do or they don't, Lauren. A large percentage of people either do it, or a large percentage of people either don't do it. Both can't be true at the same time.
Yeah, it actually can, because 50%, it can be too large. So 2 groups of 50% can still be 2 large groups, right? So you're saying that cuckolding is less than 3%. Yeah, is that what you're saying? And you don't have data for that either.
I think that it's likely. It's intuitive to me that most men probably don't want their significant other to get fucked by other men. Yeah.
And this is based just like off your intuition, based off how you personally feel about your wife and your love.
I have it. It is true. To be completely fair to you, I have not dove in to the percentage of the population which is into cuckoldry, but intuitively, I know it must be low. I know it can't be high.
Okay, but you don't have the data to support that either. just based off intuition, even though over 50% of the population.
Well, no, I do have logic which would support this. So logically, when we look at polling, we can see how many people, for instance, get divorced due to infidelity, and how many people cite infidelity as a problem within their relationships, and that is a large amount. So assuming that people have a problem with infidelity, my assumption is that they probably don't like it when their significant other gets fucked by other people other than them.
People who talk about infidelity are talking about like sexual intercourse in which they don't approve of. So for instance, I've heard of couples in open relationships in which they allow one another to sleep with other partners. They still consider it cheating or adultery if they didn't get permission or they went outside of the bounds of the relationship.
Yes, I've heard that too. But again, those are exceptions. And when these polls are done, they're asking specific questions. And some of the specific questions that they're talking about is if your partner, if infidelity is classified as your partner sleeps with another person, would that be a problem to you?
Well,
and the answer is yes. Yes.
Wait, that's not how. Okay, that's not how infidelity is classified for a lot of people. So I'd have to see that study because I would imagine, like, for instance, people in an open relationship, if you first went to them with, hey, infidelity is defined as your partner being with another person, whether or not you have permission, if they really went to people and explained the definition like that beforehand, I would imagine that would sway the results.
Lauren, you can't possibly believe that if I walked up to the average, in fact, you can bring on whatever caller, just random caller you want. And if I said the definition of infidelity is that you cheat on your partner with another person, you have sex with somebody outside of the partner you made a commitment to, do you think any of them would have a single problem with that definition? Don't you think that this is a common way that this is used? The common way?
I think a lot of people would have anyone in an open relationship would have a problem with that definition.
There's not that many people in open relationships. How many people do you think are in open relationships?
There are
women don't want their men in open relationships. They don't want that. And men don't want their women in open relationships.
Look, I'm not for open relationships. So I agree with you on most things. Like, I am against the whole LGBTQ movement. I'm not for promiscuity. I'm not for the open relationships. That being said, I have to admit they exist. You're saying they don't exist?
When did I say they don't exist, Lauren?
You just said that 5 seconds ago.
You just made that up, Lauren. I never said anything of the sort.
Alrighty.
You want to roll back the tape? Because not only did I literally not say that, but acknowledged multiple times, not only do these things exist. There weren't many of them. You said how many of them? That's an entirely different thing than me saying that they don't exist. You recognize that, right?
You're saying that they're extremely limited, but they absolutely are.
Yeah, in comparison to the average.
They absolutely exist. They exist in mass. There's plenty of people in open relationships.
There's not that many. No, I don't think so.
You're also an older religious man. I wonder how often you hang out with.
How old is 39? Is 30? Should I go out to the farm and let them put me out to pasture at 39 years old? Are we doing Logan's Run now?
39 in terms of like the age of sexual liberation is kind of older. It's mostly the millennials and zennials. And
I am a millennial.
You don't necessarily. Are you classified as a millennial?
Yeah.
Really? I'm classified. No way. Because my little sister's a millennial. I'm a millennial. 5 years younger than me, and I'm 10 years younger than you.
I'm a millennial. Look it up yourself.
15 years. Okay, whatever.
Millennial goes back to 1982. I was born in 84.
Okay. Alrighty. It's usually people younger than 30, who are engaging in these types of polyamorous, open relationship type situations. You would agree that it's the younger generation that's experimenting mostly with this?
Nope. In fact, it seems to me that most of the stories that I hear, or at least the YouTube videos that I see. Now, again, this is just intuitive. I don't know this for sure, right? But it does seem like a lot of what happens is these relationships open up later inside of a marriage. So sometimes these people are married for 10, 15 years and they want to spice it up or some ridiculous shit like that. Those seem to be a common story. So I'm not sure. Maybe you could be right that it's mostly the under 30s who are engaged in the open relationships. I'm not sure on that front, but I see plenty of it happening with couples who are married for a long time as well. And those seem to be most of the teary-eyed YouTube videos that I see anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And like, I agree with you. It's probably not healthy. It's probably not healthy for the family structure. But what I was saying earlier is when we're talking about the value of women, and we want to say that we're valuing women based off how other men, if other men would prefer them with her. So like your example, you have the same woman and she has 0 bodies. Men in general prefer her versus a woman with 50 bodies. But this is just men's. So we're taking women's value, and all we're saying is, if we believe the majority of men would appreciate this attribute, then we'll give them more value. Do you not see why that's like a bit silly?
No, it's not, because the question which is actually asked is, what gives women value to men, not what ought to be true. So I think you're conflating these two things again. You're saying, shouldn't it be true that men shouldn't value women just based on this? The answer is maybe it should be it, but even then,
hold on, let me pause you, because I hear what you're saying, and I would agree with you if that's what I mean, but I'm probably phrasing my question poorly. So I agree with you if the question is, what makes a woman more valuable to men? If that's the question, then I understand where you're coming from. Then obviously the opinion of men is literally where the value is.
But that was the question on the panel. That was the question on the panel.
No, it's not. It's about
on that panel. That was the question. What makes women more valuable to men? It was not a moral ought question about what makes them valuable in general. There's all kinds of values that I could ascribe to women outside of sexual virtues. But if you're asking what makes them valuable to men, I think that there's almost unanimous, universal agreement from most men, not all, but most men, that they would prefer to have women who have slept with less men. And I think that you would probably agree that that's true, right?
I would agree that most men would find more value in a woman if they know for certain she has a lower body count. But just like last stream, I also think this is a really silly thing for men to try to weight value in, because that's
an ought claim.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So when you're talking, so again, I got to point back to the distinction here between the is and the ought. I'm pointing out an is statement, not an ought claim. I understand that you think they ought not value that, but they do value that.
No. Hear me out. They shouldn't rely on it because then they're relying on the woman's veracity. Like, it's at that point, it's just relying on the woman telling you the truth. So you're giving value to a woman based on, like, because she told you that, I'm a virgin too. If you don't believe me.
So should we assume that women are liars?
Yeah. Most people are liars, not just women.
So if most women are liars and we shouldn't believe them, should we ask them to begin to demonstrate it? Should that be the next logical thing? Can you demonstrate how many partners you've been with?
No, I think if you actually care about like promiscuity and that's something for you, then you should see if, like, is she putting out easily for you? Is she flirting a lot with your other friends?
So there are tells.
There's tells, but it's not about just asking a woman, how many dicks have you had inside of you? And then if it's too high of a number for you, thinking, oh, she's like lost value as a person, especially because, as you said, like, let's say she had a promiscuous year, like in her youth. Does that mean that she's no longer a valuable woman? Especially because I know there are some women who go through a very promiscuous phase and then they find God, or they find Jesus, they find the church, and then they become these, beautiful messengers of God. And sometimes they're wonderful, but should they be deemed less valuable now as people because they've had?
So you have a lot of things here going at the same time, right? And a lot of them are intertwined, and I can even agree with some. So I'm going to try for the next part of this interview. Let's you and I try to be maximally charitable to each other. Let's try that instead of being so combative. Okay. So in the spirit of being charitable, I can agree with you, and I can agree with everybody that yes, there needs to be a path of redemption for women and men both who make significant mistakes with each other. Okay. There needs to be some path of redemption for both. And I think that Christianity is such a path. However, that is not going to negate the intuition of men that the more men that a woman has slept with, the less they want to do with them. That's not going to negate that. Even if they're firm believers in Christ and they are firm Christians, that does not mean that that's going to change their viewpoint on the fact that they would prefer to not be with a woman like that. They can still grant her respect, and they can still tell her that they think she's a valuable human being, and they could be extremely glad that she's reformed. But that is not going to change what they think of the actions that she did, and I don't fucking blame them.
That's an is statement. If it were an ought statement, do you think it ought to change? Like how
that
their perception?
they ought to think differently of them? No.
Yeah.
And the reason
like
that I think
if
they shouldn't, the reason I think that they shouldn't as an ought is because of, and this is the problem with the is-ought gap, right? But I'll try to be as good faith as I can. I think that the problem with this is the descriptive is. I think that men themselves, these things exist because they're warning signs. These are warning signs telling them, hey, this person is more rife for infidelity, and they're more likely to lie about paternity. Now, if you look up the stats on how many women lie about paternity, even in modernity, the stats would stagger you. It's a massive amount. It's a much larger percentage than you think who lie currently about paternity. Why wouldn't it be a red flag for a man if a woman was promiscuous to think that she might not lie about the paternity of a child? So if you're going pre-paternity testing, especially, wouldn't that be a huge red flag for you to think I could be raising a child that's not mine? There's a paternity issue here.
Okay, but you did have to caveat it with assume we're pre-paternity test here.
Yeah, so I'm trying to. Do you know why though? Why I qualified it that way? Because what I'm saying is that these warnings are innate inside of men, so they're built into us, they're constructed into us. Why wouldn't they be? Innately, we understand that paternity matters a great deal to us, and so chastity and faithfulness, that's going to be a good sign that the children are actually going to be yours. That's why those signs are so looked for and so sought after in women. They're hardwired into men.
Right. And I understand that, but can you understand, like, as time goes on, there's certain evolutionary characteristics that human beings have developed for our safety to protect us in that very aspect that you just explained that don't necessarily work anymore in the modern era with modern technology and are unnecessary.
Well, so I think that the two
tests.
things you're saying here are actually problematic. I think men and women have a nature. Okay. You would say that maybe the nature is due to evolutionary programming. And I'll just grant that for a second. But even if it wasn't due to that, and there was no evolutionary nature, it was a nature that God gave us, which is more akin to what I believe. They still do have a nature. So to tell them, well, wait, now we have paternity testing, so you can just ignore all the warning signs because you can just test for who's your kid. It doesn't change the fact that part of their nature, whether it's evolutionary or it's the nature given to them by God, that's not going to go away because it's part of their nature. We're not going to evolve past that. Evolution, even within the prism of the evolutionist, takes hundreds of thousands of years, and it happens to an entire species slowly over time. We're nowhere near the threshold of being able to shrug off our innate biases towards women who sleep with a lot of men. Why we have a natural disgust towards that for a reason, and I think that reason is likely due to the fact that they can defraud over paternity, and it's still very common to this day that they do.
And is that line of logic why you don't have the same like intense feeling towards promiscuous men? Because like naturally you don't want promiscuous women, because if you're with a promiscuous woman, then you might be raising a child that's not yours. But that's not an issue for women. If you're with a promiscuous man, you're still going to know which children are yours.
Well, that's true, but I think there's more to it, just to like qualify it a little bit more. So I think I don't think you're wrong, and I think that that's one of the reasons that the nature of men and women are so different when it comes to this. But I do find men who sleep with a lot of women to be every bit as disgusting and foul as women who do the same thing. Now, I understand that perhaps this is preferential, and I don't think that society-wide this is the same, due to the fact that the kind of these innate characteristics that men and women have, that men themselves don't see the promiscuity of men as being as problematic, and neither do women, by the way, as they see it the other direction, most likely due to the fact of paternal instinct.
Okay. Well, I am going to be wrapping this up in the next 5 minutes, but I do really appreciate you being here. I appreciate this good faith conversation, and I'd like to have another good faith conversation with
Sure.
you in the future.
Yeah, I'd like that too. I don't bear any ill will towards you. Just so you know,
Yeah, no,
I
I
don't
get that.
take any debates. Like I know that I get into it. My job is to represent my side the best way that I possibly can. And sometimes that means eviscerating the opposition. But I don't take any of this personally.
No, and I do understand that. I don't take what you're saying personally either. I just disagree when I hear like rhetoric. For instance, when I was debating you last, I felt like I was hearing a lot of rhetoric that was hateful towards women, one-sided in the blame of the guilt of like the failure of society, and also too generative and not based 100% in reality. You're making claims like most men, instead of like, okay, well, let's look at like there is nuance. Not all men like this. It's actually a large portion of men who don't like that. So that was just kind of where I was getting at. But
So I understand the viewpoint. I honestly do understand the viewpoint that people find the things that I say to be mean. They think that I'm being mean. Okay. I'm not being mean. I'm trying to explain a descriptor for reality. And the descriptor for reality often sounds mean because reality is fucking brutal. And that's the truth. It's brutal. The natural world is brutal, and human beings' interactions with each other is brutal. And I know it's not fun sometimes for people, especially women, to hear some of this dark truths because of the ninjutsu move called What About Demendo, where you try to talk about the bad behavior of women, and women instantly pivot to What About Demendo with their karate chop, right? Well, the thing is we're not talking about men right now. We're talking about the bad behavior of women. Can we focus
why
on
do
that?
we
And then
seem
it's
to
What About Demendo? You know?
It just seems like we're always focusing, especially when you have Fresh and Fit, you have whatever podcast, you have so many of these panels just constantly being like, women are promiscuous and causing the
Well,
failure
yeah,
of
that's right.
society,
Because
and da, 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 da.
finally,
And
there's
it's
a little
never
bit of
enough.
pushback from the years that I grew up and the years that you grew up of every single major media station on planet Earth shitting on men 24 hours a day, making us sound like we were Homer Simpson retards, making us sound like we couldn't tie our own shoes, making us sound like we were Tim the Tool Man Taylor who couldn't operate a power tool without hurting ourselves. They've been shitting on us for years, and finally there's a tiny bit of pushback, and women go, but what about Demendo? And it's like, it's so disingenuous.
The hatred towards men that we've been seeing in media for decades is totally uncalled for, and I agree. And I'm glad that it's finally getting pushed back. And it is, and what you said about making men seem like Homer Simpson retards constantly is so true. And media has done that for a really long time, but they haven't had, from what I've noticed, like entire shows just being like, why men suck ass, and why, how men have caused the fall. Why men, like, maybe they're
I guess you haven't watched The View because they have not only have they, but
The
you
View
should go
isn't
back. You
just
should go
about
back.
men.
I'll give you some homework. I'll tell you what. Why don't we do this? I'm going to give you some homework, and we reconvene in a week. Okay. We're going to reconvene in a week. Go watch these soap operas from the 90s. Go watch them. Okay.
No, I agree with you.
And
that
tell me that they don't vilify the men in a way that is like over the top insane. I mean, and they expand that women are just the most virtuous creatures on earth. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Like, what? Are you serious?
No, I agree with you that I know what you're saying, and I know what you're talking about, but it's different when it's like put into a podcast, or sorry, he's put into like a TV show as a character versus having an entire podcast where the subject is like the entire point of Fresh and Fit is bringing on whores and then calling them those women whores.
Fucking babes.
Right. There's no there's no equivalent for men right now.
Well, wait a second. Podcasts are like in the major media arena. You know, they're like the lowest tier. Okay.
Yeah.
Major media sitcoms, like major media sitcoms and soap operas and The View and all these different chat shows, Ellen DeGenerate, all these different people have been shitting on men since I was this tall. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, but Fresh and Fit has finally taken some skanks and proven that men's or women's nature is not nearly as benevolent as you might have thought.
It's not. The Ellen DeGeneres show, we'll talk about animals, we'll do little cute clips. The entire premise of the show isn't why men suck ass, whereas there's now entire premises of the show but I understand where you're coming from. I am going to have to cut you off here because I am late for a different podcast, but I am very excited to set up next week. And you want to do same time next week?
Yeah, we'll do the same bat time, same bat channel. That's an old reference. Old reference. No, anyway, appreciate it very much. Have a good day.
Hi, Andrew. Bye, chat. Have a good one. So I think that I forgot to turn off the thing to end the stream. And then I went to go back onto the other channel and they aren't even doing the podcast. So I just left this going. But anyway, I want to address a couple of things while I'm here because might as well, right? Beating cheeks. Let me pull up one of your messages. There you are. You. I have our DMs. I have them screenshot. You want to be talking shit and then trying to eat my ass out later? It's not going to work, baby doll. It's not going to work. Okay, now I'm going to end the stream. All right, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.